If you want to buy an HVAC business in 2026, we have the guy for you. Today, we are interviewing Patrick Lang, who just sold his 169th HVAC business. It closed today. He's got another one closing soon. This guy knows what he's doing. He's done it many times. And so if you've ever thought about buying one, he's going to give you a very tactical breakdown of exactly the steps that you should take to go through it. We're going to cut through a lot of the BS today. There's a lot of stuff out there on the internet that makes it seem a lot more straightforward and less complicated than it is. The reality is you can do this, but there's homework you need to do. There's things you need to have in place. And Patrick's going to break it down for us. Patrick, thanks so much for being on.
Thank you both for having me back. It's been a little while, so I'm excited to be back here, and congratulations on everything you guys have been doing on the channel.
Well, we appreciate it. Glad to have you back.
Yeah, it's exciting to be here.
And so let's kind of start with that count, the 169, and just kind of a brief overview of like how you got there, what it's been like, the road to getting to 169 HVAC businesses sold, why this industry, and what can people kind of get started with if they're thinking about this industry and trying to decide if it's right for them.
Yeah, so I'll back up quite a ways, but I'll be brief. So I've been a broker for a number of years, and I've sold everything: bars, restaurants, flower shops, gas stations, you name it. I sold it. It's probably been 8 or 9 years now. I bought a heating and air company I had listed for sale. So I can't fix an air conditioner, don't come from a trades background. So for many of your viewers or listeners, I was probably in their shoes, right? I wanted to buy a business that I like businesses with barriers to entry. Heating and air in Florida, you have to have a license. So I think there's benefits in having a business with barriers to entry. I'm also based in Florida, and I don't know a husband dumb enough to tell his wife he's not fixing the air conditioner. So I thought, as I'm looking at businesses, air conditioning is a need, not a want, I believe, in this day and age. And so I listed a heating and air company for sale and broke the golden rule of brokers, and I bought it. And so you never buy your own listing, and I did. Ran it for a few years and realized I didn't belong running a heating and air business. I love the business brokerage world. I missed doing deals. I missed looking at businesses, both successful and unsuccessful, and I went to sell it. And when I went to sell it, we were a small company under $2 million in sales. And I realized that there wasn't anybody who was providing a lot of value in that space. So if you're doing 20 or 30 million, tons of people to help you. Doing 2 million or less, there wasn't really anybody there. And so I thought there was an opportunity. My son and daughter-in-law actually ended up buying me out. They run the business today. So that has been a little over 6 years ago that I made the switch. They bought me out. And I thought, well, there's an opportunity here that if as a broker, if I couldn't find accurate, valuable information, what's somebody who spent the last 30 years in a van or in an office running their heating and air company? So I decided to kind of go after that market. As I've mentioned multiple times now, I'm based in Florida. So the first few listings I took on were in Florida. Then I listed a company in Georgia, then one in South Carolina. Then COVID hit, and COVID was incredible for my business. I was able to travel around the country for next to nothing. Every seat was first class, right? You couldn't sit next to anybody, tons of space. Every rent-a-car was available. Every hotel room was empty. It was a great time for me. I was flying. I tell this story a lot. I was flying from Gainesville, Florida to LA round trip for $250. Right? I'd leave Gainesville at 6 o'clock in the morning, get to LA at like 10 in the morning, do a few meetings, next morning, get up, fly back. And you know, much of the country had shut down. Florida, we didn't know COVID existed, so you could travel anywhere, do anything, and it worked out very well. And we were blessed, right? We were very fortunate that business has expanded. Started with 1, 2, 3, 5, and 169 was today. So I've been able to be around a lot of people's transition through business ownership. And in that period, I've helped a lot of people with no trades experience acquire companies, right? So we sell a lot of companies to private equity, big consolidators. We sell a lot to mom and pops buying other mom and pops. We sell a lot to kids who are trying to get into the space and buy out their parents, employees buying out their bosses, but a lot of people, and COVID, I think, had a lot to do with that. The trades became attractive, you know, where people were buying gyms and restaurants and other things. Those things shut down. And everyone was locked in their house and still needed air conditioning, still needed plumbing, still needed electrical. And so those were needed services and were able to continue working. And many of the companies we've represented had their best years ever during COVID. And so it brought a magnifying glass to the trade. So I was very fortunate from a timing perspective to be where I was. And we've continued to grow since.
Absolutely incredible. Just under 10 years. I mean, that's like, well, we're talking about I mean, that's like almost 16 sales a year of just HVAC. I mean, truly, you don't get there by mistake, and you don't get there without knowing exactly what you're doing. So a lot of people come to you every day. I'm sure you probably are spending half your day on the phone and emailing. I'd say when we're talking about the initial contact, what is the first sign when you see a buyer come to you and say, I want to buy an HVAC? What's the first thing that you always, or what's the most common thing that you get from them that shows you they have no idea what they're getting themselves into?
Yeah. So you're good on the numbers that it's ramped up. I think last year we did 23 deals. And year to date, I think I just closed, today was my 19th. So we're on pace this year to certainly do better than last year. And the market's good, right? I think from a buyer and seller perspective, there's a lot of transactions taking place. I think it's good for both sides. When somebody reaches out to us, typically they'll respond to a listing, and they'll request additional information. And so we'll normally send them out an NDA to sign, and we're going to ask them. And we talked about this before we got started on this. And Brody, you and I have talked about it a bunch over the last few months. SBA had a rule change last year in June. And as a result of that rule change, we're going to send out to a buyer we don't know, we're going to send them out an email saying, are you using SBA? And if you are using SBA, do you have a license? And that response is going to dictate how we're going to kind of move forward. To provide more details on that, last June, SBA came out and said, hey, if the seller remains on as a license holder, and they didn't say it in those words, they said if the seller remains on as an employee or holds any equity in the business, they now have to personally guarantee the loan for 2 years. What they don't also say is if that buyer is late on any of those payments in 2 years, it automatically resets the 2-year personal guarantee window. So a seller, I don't have a seller that's willing to personally guarantee a stranger's loan who doesn't have any industry experience on a business that they don't want to own, right? So they basically shut down the seller remaining on as a license holder. Because in most states, in order to be the license qualifier of the business, you have to either be an owner or you have to be an employee. Well, they've just said now if they're an owner or they're an employee, they have to personally guarantee the loan. So it eliminates them from being the license qualifier. Most of the businesses we sell, the seller is the sole license holder. And the rationale there is many of them 30 years ago didn't like their boss, got their own license, went into business, and they've never needed another license holder, right? If you're in Florida, Georgia, these states that require licenses, if you have one license holder, you don't need another one. So there's been no reason for that owner to get somebody else licensed. Second part of that is many sellers, many owners believe if I get you my employee license, well, I'm creating my own competition. Now you're going to go start your own business and compete against me. So they typically don't have other license holders there. So when a buyer, specifically with no industry experience, plans on using SBA financing, they have to have a plan for licensing. And we'll ask them, what are you doing for a license? And many say, well, can't I just keep the license? Doesn't it transfer over? And it doesn't for most trades, almost all trades, heating and air, plumbing and electric anyways, in most states. So it's not a transferable thing. A person has to have it. And by holding the license, they're saying, I'm going to supervise the work that they're doing. So that's why it has to go to a person, because that person has to sign on the permit or sign with the state that says, hey, when we're doing an installation or a change out or work, I'm going to be the one viewing it. So that's typically the first, I'm going to say, red flag. When someone comes to us that they either haven't done their homework or they don't know what the rules are yet at this point.
Now, what are the workarounds for that? Because I've heard of businesses in the trades having what's called a qualifier before, someone who is a license holder who maybe is not super active in the business, but is willing to kind of put their name out there and their license out there to qualify the business or to be that supervisor. How do you, is that still something that's able to be done with these SBA rules? Is that something that you see commonly? What kind of plan do people usually have when they come to you and they have thought through that and they have a plan already?
Yeah. So a couple different questions there. The first one is, can you use a license qualifier? Yeah, absolutely you can. Just, it's a gray area. Many people call it renting a license, right? They put somebody on payroll and give them money for the use of their license, and they're the ones who sign off on the license. Once again, very gray area, but it happens. That's an option, but it's really up to each individual lender how they're going to treat that, right? So some lenders, with the rule change, and you're bringing in an outsider, we'll call them, some lenders say they have to have equity in the business. You have to give them some equity in the business. Other lenders say they have to sign a long-term employment agreement. Other lenders, it's a mixture of those things. And a lot of it has to do with your background as the buyer, because the SBA doesn't dictate who the license holder can be. With the rule change, the SBA just says it can't be the seller. So they don't say who it can be. Each lender has a scale of what they want. And if you come in with no industry experience, no management experience, no business experience at all, blah, 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 all these things I'm going to say against you from a business owner's perspective, that lender is typically going to say, hey, I want them to have equity. I want them to have skin in the game. Doesn't have to be a lot, typically 3, 4, 5%. But many buyers don't want to give a complete stranger who's just qualifying their license equity in their business. So that's kind of what creates that issue there. Is that's a workaround. A longer term approach we've seen is, if you have cash to buy a business, buy a smaller business that has a license qualifier there is willing to continue on and qualify your business. So you buy a company not for $1 million, but for $100,000. That seller says, hey, I'll continue to qualify your license. So you do that. And now you go to the SBA to buy a bigger one, right? So now you've already got a license qualifier. Has nothing to do with the transaction that you're going to do with the SBA. You're already in the business. So you check that box. They don't say, how long have you had a qualifier? They say, are you in business and do you have a license qualifier? Yes, I do. Okay, great. So there's a way around that. It takes some more planning, right? And it takes some cash, because you've got to have the ability to buy out this other business, typically cash because it's a smaller business, or some other way of buying it, raising capital, getting investors, whatever the case may be. But now when you go back to that bigger acquisition, you can say, hey, I'm already in the industry. I already have a license qualifier. It has nothing to do with the seller in this business. And you could do it that way.
That's interesting, because if you take that long-term strategy, you're probably, as long as you keep both businesses running well and you're able to effectively combine them, you're probably getting a little bit of like a lift in your equity value right away just from combining them. If it's a very small business, it might not be significant, but if let's say you're acquiring one with a few $100,000 in EBITDA per year as the larger one, and then you combine that with the smaller one, another 50, 100,000 a year in cash flow that it's bringing, you might even get a lift in another multiple or something.
Instantly. Right. Yeah, absolutely. So it's a positive thing. Many people are not patient enough to do it, right? I don't want to buy a small company because I need one that's making 500,000 a year, instead of, hey, I'm going to buy a company making 50 grand a year in profit. After I pay the license holder, after I do this, I'm going to learn the business. I'm going to understand everything. And then I'm going to go buy bigger, because they're thinking buying millions. And this approach is often too slow for them.
That's interesting. I also, for anyone who might be listening or watching this, who's already an HVAC owner in Florida, if I was already a licensed HVAC owner in Florida, I would be thinking, okay, well, I can go get equity in some deals now. I need to meet Patrick and get my name on the short list for some of these deals that are trying to get done, because there's a lot of for lack of better words, it's not completely free. It's you're putting some risk in there and you're putting your name on the line. But if you feel like it's a good business and a good operator, you could bring your license to the table as a way to earn equity in some businesses.
And get paid, right? Because you're getting paid for doing it. So we do some matchmaking services like that. And in Florida, which is super unique to other states, you can qualify 3 companies with 1 license. So in most states, it's 1, right? And then states like New Jersey and certain cities in New York, you've got to have 10% or 20% ownership. So they dictate, the state does. Florida's super unique where you can qualify 3. And as we talked previously, there's other states like Tennessee that you don't even need a license. As long as the work you're doing is under 25,000, you don't need a license. So that Tennessee may be a better market for a heating and air buyer with no industry experience, right? Because you can get the SBA funding there. Many people haven't taken the time to kind of do their homework and research the licensing and look at what states do you need a license, what states don't you need a license. So there's some workarounds there, right? And there is some reciprocity too in states with licensing. So I know some people who are licensed in 6 and 7 states from just what you're talking about. Their retirement plan is qualifying businesses, and they're making good money and getting equity. Now they're getting equity. Before they were getting paid as an employee for qualifying it. Now, if the bank says you got to have equity, now they're getting paid to qualify it, and they're getting equity in the business that potentially could yield big returns, right? If the buyer does a great job.
So if I'm approaching retirement age right now, I'm going to HVAC school. Honestly, if I'm like 60, 65 years old and I look at the process, I mean, it might be a little bit grueling going through that process, but you could set yourself up with a nice income stream and some really good retirement prospects. Just going and getting that license.
Here's the issue for most states. You don't have to go to school. Most states just need industry experience. You need to work and then sit for the exam. And so some states, it is all about schooling, right? They'll have an apprentice type of program through a school, and it is. So once again, it's doing your homework. Where are you located? Am I in Florida, or I'm in Texas, or what state? Each state is a little bit unique, and a quick Google search of do I need an HVAC license in the state of Georgia will bring up, here's what you need, and here's what the experience is, and here's what a college education. In some states, it'll buy your time off. Like Florida, you need 4 years, but if you have a college degree, that counts for 1 of those years. So now all of a sudden you only need 3. And so there's different ways around it to be able to sit for that exam.
All right. So the buyer comes back and they say, no, they answer correctly. They have a lender, they have multiple lenders. They've done their stuff. They have their letters. They have their, whatever. They have their license. Let's say they brought their uncle who happens to be an HVAC guy. What is the next stumbling block that a lot of people hit in the process with you?
Back to doing a little bit of homework. A lot of people hear catchphrases like maintenance agreements or commercial versus residential, and they haven't really taken the time to realize, look at what does that mean. Many people hear about maintenance programs and they think that it's the whole business is recurring revenue. Well, the average residential heating and air company maintenance program is $200 a year. So you could have hundreds of them and still not a big portion of your income. The benefit comes from being in the customer's home twice a year. They're paying for their own loyalty. There's all these other things that are a benefit of having it, but they don't even know that because they haven't taken 5 minutes to take a look at what that is. And understanding the business, back to commercial versus residential. A residential company is typically COD. Go to Mrs. Smith's house. When you leave with a check in your hand. And so when your technicians leave the shop that morning, they come back with more money than they left with. So it's a good business model. Commercial is a little more unique, and often commercial has terms, 30, 60, 90-day terms, depending on who they're working with. So now there's cash flow included. So now you've got to understand what cash flow really looks like in that business, and many people don't understand that. Then is there construction exposure? Is there not? Right? If there's in commercial and construction, there's often high customer concentration, right? They could they could get 50, 60, 70% of the revenue from 2 or 3 people. And as you're buying it, 1 or 2 of those people left, your business could be cut in half. So taking the time just to research, and you could do it all on Google, right? Understanding the difference between commercial and residential. Is commercial bad? No, certainly not, right? If somebody's got $200,000 of meat in a walk-in cooler, they've got to pay somebody to come out and fix it immediately. And so there's an opportunity there to have better pricing. But now you've also got to have technicians who are available 24 hours a day. So each of these pluses and minuses are involved there, and many people don't take the time just to look at that, right? And then next within that is going to be, if you're using SBA financing, what about a down payment? What are their expectations? What about a debt service coverage ratio? So understanding that if the business is making 300,000, but I've got to pay 150,000 in debt service a year, is it going to cash flow enough for my understanding or my family life, right? Because SBA, and we'll stay on that SBA model, SBA is going to take a look at what you need as a person to pay your bills, what the business needs to pay its bills, and what it needs to cover the debt service. So those things need to line up, or they're not going to loan you that money. So many people call me and say, I want to buy a $10 million company. Well, the reality is a $10 million heating and air company that's all based on the business, no real estate, they're not going to lend on it anyways. Excuse me. And the multiple is going to be so high on that business that it'll never appraise for SBA. So SBA is going to hire a third-party appraiser. Because a huge private equity firm will pay a crazy multiple for it, doesn't mean the SBA is going to. So understanding the SBA guidelines and where they're going to be and what that value is going to be is super important as well.
So someone comes to you, they have the plan for the licensing. They've thought through some of the requirements of the business. Maybe they have picked out a particular business, maybe one that you have listed already, and it seems really good. And it seems like the price is agreed upon by both parties. They're going to have to coordinate with the SBA on what the SBA is willing to lend. What about the side of the person applying for the SBA loan? What kind of things do they need to have in place as a person, and what kind of profile do you tend to see they need to have to be able to be lendable?
Decent credit is the first one. That's not the SBA's number one concern. So it's not like you need to have a 780 credit score in order to get a deal done. SBA is going to look more at the business than they are necessarily at the individual. But they're going to want to make sure that the individual has a plan in place, like you'd already mentioned, has saved up some capital, right? Depending on the scenario, SBA is going to acquire 10 or 20% down, depending on what they're looking at. And so they'll allow the seller to finance a portion of that, but they still want you to have some skin in the game. And I have many buyers, shockingly many buyers, call me and, hey, I'm looking at this $2 million deal. Well, great. What do you have to put down? Well, I don't have any money. So you think the bank's going to lend you $2 million and you haven't been able to save a nickel on a business that you've never run and don't have any industry experience in. As you say that out loud, you've got to be thinking, wow, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But it doesn't. Many buyers, I don't know if they watched a video or they heard something that you're going to go buy this business that doesn't require you to be there. It can be absentee run. It just prints money. You don't need experience. All these wonderful things are going to happen. Somebody's going to give it to you for next to nothing, and you don't have to have any skin in the game. That's not real. Whoever sold them that bill of goods lied to them. It's just not going to happen. And many people think, well, I'm just not going to do it SBA. I'm going to get a seller to just finance it for me. Well, put yourself in a seller's shoes. For most sellers, it's the largest asset, right? If they do a seller note for you and you fail, what do they get? Because you haven't put any money down. They get the business back that they didn't want anyways. That's why they're selling the business. And so they take all the risk. And now if you fail, chances are the business is not doing well anymore. So it's a huge risk for the seller with you not having anything to put down. So I think coming to the deal with something that shows, hey, I've been able to save some money. I've been able to accumulate, whether it's through investors or whatever it is, I've been able to accumulate some assets that I'm going to feel comfortable giving you my largest asset to walk away with. And same thing with the bank. The beauty of SBA, in my opinion, is SBA lends on cash flow, not on assets, right? Conventional lending, if you want $1 million loan, you've got to have $1 million of assets to back it up. Well, SBA doesn't say that. SBA says, if you want to get $1 million loan, we need to have a business that's going to support the debt service of the $1 million loan, and you're in a position to be able to run it effectively. And so they're going to want to see some sort of, it's not always business background, but management and understanding background that they're going to feel comfortable with, that you're going to be okay with it.
Now, what about where that capital comes from? I know you mentioned whether it be that you saved a nest egg up or whether you have investors coming to the table. From my experience, what I've seen, different lenders have different opinions on that. Sometimes they'll say, well, no, it all has to come from whoever is getting the loan, or a large portion of it does. Sometimes they don't have that, from my experience at least. What's usually the determining factor of that? And for someone who maybe is trying to get into it, even if they've saved up some money, but they don't want to put their own capital at risk, or they want to try to bring in an investor, is that a structure that you can get done these days with the SBA rules? Do you see a lot of people do that, or is that kind of tough to get done?
Yeah, it's certainly harder to get done, but it's doable. A lot of it has to do with who you are as a buyer, right? If you come in and have no business experience, you've never done anything, you've never accumulated assets, then if you're a lender, put yourself in the lender's shoes, how confident are you going to feel betting on this person, right? But if you come to the table and say, yes, I haven't owned my own business, but I've been working at this job, I've had some management experience, I understand the technology, I've saved $100 or $200 or $300,000, so it gives them a warm, fuzzy feeling, right? So all those things go into that decision. Is it doable? Yes, absolutely. Is it harder? Yes, absolutely. Playing with somebody else's money, because once again, the SBA and any lender really, wants to show that you've got some skin in the game, right? If you're using everybody else's money and it fails, well, it's a shame, it failed. But if you're using your hard-earned money that you've saved, chances are you're going to do what you can to make sure it doesn't fail. And that's all they care about. At the end of the day, all the lenders in the SBA care about is getting paid back. That's their only concern. They don't care about your success, you being a great person, you doing all these wonderful things. They care about getting their money back plus interest. And anything that you bring to the table that reduces their risk on not getting paid back, they like you more.
So they want to see you've got competency, you've got a background that we can trust, you've got skin in the game, you've got a plan, you're licensed. What are the other requirements or things that you recommend people have in place if they're trying to set themselves up for success to be able to acquire an HVAC business? Because we were talking a little bit off air before we got started here about just how many people you end up having to unfortunately turn away to go do more homework. You're turning away sometimes dozens of people a day or a week that just haven't done their homework or just are not in the place that they need to be. And I think there's just a lot of knowledge that you have that people could benefit from if they're able to just do that homework on the front end and focus on, maybe you want to buy a business today, but maybe the next 1 or 2 years need to be prep to get to the point where you can pull that off.
Yeah, 100%. You said the things that I would focus on. So if they've done that, they're ready to buy. Understanding, doing the research on the industry, right? Whether it's plumbing, heating and air, electrical, what it is, understanding the business, understanding how money's really being made, understanding what licenses are required, what you can do with those licenses, what that looks like, understanding the cash flow of a business, right? I have people in certain, the company I sold today was in Texas, and it was in Southwest Texas. Well, Southwest Texas doesn't really get a winter, right? I mean, it's a fairly warm place to be. And a buyer who came along a few months ago was shocked that the business was seasonal, right? And I'm thinking, how are you looking at a heating and air company in South Texas and not understanding that it's seasonal, right? I mean, you don't need to be a heating and air genius to realize that it's going to be seasonal, right? I mean, if you buy a business in Miami, Florida, there's probably not a big heating season, right? That's just, I mean, you don't need to be brilliant at understanding the trades to understand that. And so I think some people just don't take 5 minutes to research that, right? I sold a company in Alaska, relatively seasonal, right? Not a huge summer, but a very long winter, right? And so buyers were saying, looking at the monthly financials and saying, wow, they didn't do well in the summer. Well, no doubt they didn't, right? I mean, it's not that warm. And so I think little things like that, it's understanding the business, understanding the seasonality, understanding what goes in, what the licensing requirements are. If you're going to ask about a maintenance agreement, know what a maintenance agreement is. So I'm just saying, do a little homework. What we talked about before is look at deals, right? Understand, what is a real multiple? Not, I heard somewhere that this is what the multiple should be. Look at it. Spend a little time doing research. See what these companies are selling for. So when you go into it, you're going into it with realistic expectations. People call me, went to a seminar, trade show, something, heard you need to buy a company doing $1 million in EBITDA. Come to me and say, I want to buy a company $1 million in EBITDA. And I'll ask them, any experience, blah, 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 none. Okay, what are you expecting to pay for that? Service, repair, replacement, no new construction, all residential in a market like Atlanta. So it's like you're looking for the white unicorn, right? I mean, it's the dream business that everybody's trying to buy. Oh, I'd like to get it a 3-time multiple. Well, you're going to be looking for the rest of your life. You're never going to see that. So it's not going to happen. If it does, if a seller in Atlanta, Georgia, with a company doing $10 million in sales making $1 million a year is willing to sell that company for $3 million, they're an idiot. You should run away. There's something wrong with them if they're willing to do that, because there'll be buyers lining up to buy it for $8 and $10 million, right? So there's got to be some reason there's that big of a disconnect. So just understanding the broad strokes of the business is important to me, in my opinion, right? You don't need to be a trades expert. I owned a heating and air company. I've sold 169 of them. I can't fix an air conditioner, right? So I don't think you need to be a trades expert. Does it help you to understand the business? Absolutely. Does it help you better to speak the language and understand what's going on? Absolutely. So I'm not saying you need to be a complete stranger to it, but you don't need to be the technical wizard of the business, but you need to understand, right? And a story I use when I first bought a heating and air company, and this is shame on me, if my technician left and was gone for 4 hours and he came back and I'll say, hey, what happened? Oh, I had to fix their capacitor. Well, the first day I'd have been like, good for you. Gone 4 hours, fixed the capacitor. That's awesome. Now I know if they're there more than 15 minutes to fix the capacitor, something's wrong. So there's a learning curve that you have, right? And I wouldn't have known that prior to buying the business, but it was a risk that I took getting into it. And so I paid for that education. And as time went on, I educated myself more on the trade and on the business. But the basic stuff about the business, commercial versus residential, construction, being able to look at cash flow. We've looked at deals, I think, previously that was heavy in commercial. And I said, hey, what's the AR look like? I've had people call me and say, hey, let's look at these deals together. I've had a lot of people, and I'll tell people, send me a deal. I'm happy to look at it with you. And I'm looking at the deal and I'm like, well, how much AR do they have? Company doing $3 million in sales, all commercial. Oh, I didn't think of asking that. Well, ask it and call me back. Okay, and they call me back. They have $1 million in AR. And I'm like, how are you going to handle that cash flow? Well, I didn't even think about that. And if you make an offer, who gets it? They were already talking about offers, and I said, and they're saying, hey, I offered them this price. Is that good? And that's how I said about the AR. Well, if you don't know that commercial has a lot of AR, you could buy a business and be broke day one. And so understanding a little bit about the business is going to be so huge. And I went off a complete tangent, Brody, so I apologize. I don't even know if I answered your question.
I think you nailed it, honestly.
What should people be looking at, and what should they know, and that kind of stuff, right? So research it in plumbing. I have people that are looking at heating and air, and I sell a lot of plumbing companies too. And so then they'll say, well, Well, why is the plumbing company more profitable? Well, there's no cost of goods, right? They're not selling a $10,000 piece of equipment. They're selling pipe and glue, and so understanding the business model of what you're trying to buy to me would be so important.
Along those same lines, you've sold 169 of them. You've been doing it for years and years now. You've introduced us to some people behind the scenes who have been tremendously successful with these acquisitions they've made. I'm sure there are varying levels of success, though, right? I'm sure some people buy one, they do well. Some people do incredibly well. What are the differences in skill sets that people should be trying to build if they've decided they're going to do this, if they want to have tremendous growth afterwards? Because I know the type of person you are. I know you keep these relationships long term. So I would imagine you get to know a lot about what goes on after these acquisitions happen. What's the difference between who's the most successful and who maybe has some solid, steady growth, but isn't just shooting for the moon?
A couple things. One, I think success leaves clues in anything, right? In my brokerage business, I stole everything I could from other brokers who were successful. And I think in the trade space that exists, right? There's all sorts of training organizations that allow networking with a lot of people. And there's a lot of great people in the industry willing to share. So I think being willing to be a student, where I've seen people who struggled is they had to be right. And my advice to somebody getting into the trade specifically with no experience is your first month or two, shut your mouth, right? Just get in and pay attention. These are people who've run a business for 20 or 30 years. They may not be perfect, but they're going to get you a high level overview so you understand how it works. Too many people come in and they heard you need to switch this, and I think you need to switch that, and we need to be doing it this way, you need to be doing it that way, and they alienate everybody. And I don't care what trade it is, it's a people business, right? Dealing with the customers is a people business. Dealing with the employees is a people business. Dealing with your suppliers is a people business. And so I think listening to people and being a good people person and willing to take advice is probably the best thing I can see. Too many people get in and have to be right. And it's not about being right. It's about understanding the business and learning what you don't know. When I first bought my company, I shut my mouth and rode in the van with the installer. And we crawled underneath houses and we drug air conditioners out. And we, everything I could do to learn, what's that? What about this? What about that? And then I started making changes about, hey, I want guys dressed this way, and here's what pricing needs to look like. But it was also going to classes, reading books, doing everything I could to get myself around successful people who've already done it and laid the path that helps me do it. So that would be it. I think being a good student, being willing to shut your mouth and just pay attention around you. And there's a lot of trainings I've been to, and I'm at every single trade show, and I see people up on stage, and I hear a lot of people, and I'm thinking, that's the exact opposite of what I want to do, right? So I think there's a lot you can learn by watching other people, and there's a lot you can learn what not to do by being around other people. A big thing in the industry is changeouts, right? It's high ticket, high volume, not something I personally agree with, right? I think everybody doesn't need an air conditioner. I think you can fix air conditioners and still take care of people. And so there's an ethical dilemma that I have in that side of the business, because I've seen both sides. And I think you should offer people choices. I think they should be educated and be offered to buy a new one if they want to. But everybody doesn't have to buy a new one. You should still be able to take care of people. And so I think you could learn a lot just by shutting up and showing up, right? So that's probably get off my soapbox on that one. But I just think that there's a lot you can learn by not thinking you know everything.
No, that's a huge one. And I think that brings up, another question, which is there's all these little sub skill sets, I think, that probably come up when you do start shutting up and listen. listening once you get into it. From what you've seen from the people who have had these experiences, if you were trying to prepare yourself and trying to bring some of that knowledge into it, where do you rank technical expertise versus sales and marketing knowledge and leadership? Some of these more kind of general broad business things like sales, marketing, and leadership compared to the actual specific industry expertise, like understanding when is a change out needed, understanding how long the condenser takes to fix.
Wow, that's an incredible question. And I think you've got to have both. Someone told me a long time ago, to be successful in business, you should have the mind of a capitalist and a heart of a social worker, right? Understand making money, but being willing to take care of people. And I think it's the exact same in the trades. I think you've got to have a working knowledge. Do you have to have it on day one? No. But the faster you get it, the better you are at decision making. And if you're building a big sales organization, right? Developing sales, and a lot of these companies we sell, they've got no sales, right? They've just fixed air conditioners for 30 years and the phone just rings. And if somebody buys it, they want to grow that and scale that business. Well, you need sales. But I think you also need ethics in the sales. And if you don't understand the things you brought up, when is a change out right? When does that happen? I think it's challenging, and I've always been the anti-change out guy. And I was at a training, and this is probably too deep in the woods, but hopefully it proves the point. The guy training said, "Hey, your technician's at somebody's house, and they've got a 10-year-old system, and their school teacher making $35,000 a year. You could fix. There's a leak in the coil. And it's been leaking for a while, and they've been adding stuff to it. You can fix it for $1,500, or you could sell her a new one for $12,000. What's better?" And automatically I'm thinking, well, fix it, right? She's making 35 grand a year, fix it. And he said, "That's great, but if we fix it for 1,500 and it's been leaking for a long time and it's 10 years old, how much longer do you think it's going to last? And now if you just charge her $1,500 and it only lasts 6 more months, did you really do a good job for her?" Second part of that is you can finance it with zero. The financing that's available today with zero money down and zero interest for 2 years or 3 years or whatever it may be. So now she can have a brand new unit with a 10-year warranty with no money out of pocket, and it only costs her $100 a month. Now, which one's better for her? It's like, whew, I didn't even think of that. So I think you have to understand the equipment and understand the business and understand how long is that a piece of equipment going to last, right? There's oil in the refrigerant and the Freon, and if your car runs without oil for a long time, it's probably not going to do very well. If your air conditioner's been running without oil for a long time, it's probably not going to do very well or last very long. So you may be putting a Band-Aid on it for $1,500 and then having to sell her something again in 2 months. And is that really in her best interest? So understanding all that and understanding the 10-year warranties and understanding the stuff that goes into it really makes it not such an easy, fix it answer. It may say she has less of an impact, $100 a month she's got to spend, and her new unit's going to be more energy efficient. It's going to save her money on electricity. And for the next 10 years, she shouldn't have to put a penny in it to fix it. If anything else were to go wrong, it may be a better alternative. And so, sorry to go on that tangent, but I think it explains, you need to know both sides of it to understand and to be able to present the offers to somebody like that, right? So you need some sales experience to know what's her electric bill been. Has it been high? My guess is with the 10-plus-year-old system, it probably is high. And if it's been leaking and she's been putting $1,000 a year into it, heck, she may be able to put $1,000 a year into a brand new piece of equipment and know she's going to have it for another 10 years. So I think it's not as easy as you need to be great at management and you need to be great at tech. I think you need to have an understanding of both, or you need to be able to hire the people that have that that ability. Does that answer your question?
That's
Probably
a great
better
answer.
than we could have ever thought to answer it.
Huge hack for any kind of home improvement business, by the way, too. I have a business interest in a custom landscaping company. We just got that same sort of financing in place for anyone who's listening who's in like a home improvement business. Get that kind of financing in place for your customers yesterday, because it's out there. I think we got it through Wells Fargo or something, where we can offer 2 or 3 years 0% interest, and it just makes the sale so much easier, and it makes it so much easier on the customer, and makes it so much more feasible a lot of times, whether you're an HVAC or something else. Just huge recommendation there. So I'm glad you touched on that.
Yeah, and somebody told me one time, Christmas comes the same time every year, but people don't save up money for Christmas, right? They knew it's coming, but they still don't save up money. How many people are sitting home today thinking, well, I should be setting aside $10,000 because my air conditioner is going to break in the next year, right? Nobody. And so being able to have options, and I'm a believer in options for a customer standpoint. Educate them, let them know what exists, and let them make a choice. And if you price your business properly, you can make money on the repair or the replacement. And as long as the customer chooses it and you've educated them, good for them. You're profitable, you're making money, you're doing what they want you to do. Some will want the replacement, some will want the repair, and good for you, and hopefully you get both of them.
And honestly, that sort of view only comes with years of doing it and repetition, like you said, and experiencing it. And like you said yourself, pursuing that education, the trade shows where you frequently are invited to, and frequently you post about, going to events and speaking and having booths. Is the only real way to get into the industry and to understand it. And you don't have to have a business in the HVAC system, and correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, to attend many of these. And a lot of them, they're very cheap.
Right. Yeah, you can go to any of them. And I can't tell you how many people that I've met at trade shows that years later come back and bought businesses from me. Or I'll see them at a trade show and they're like, hey, you didn't have what I was looking for, but I bought 3 now. We're doing this and doing that. We're super successful and blah, 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 blah. That they were at a trade show just walking around asking questions 2 years ago, right? And instead of going to the beach on vacation, go to a trade show, right? Imagine what you could learn, doing that. And I see people doing it, and they're ultra successful, and they're meeting other people. They're meeting license holders. They're meeting other trainers. They're meeting the companies that offer financing. They're meeting this. So when they show up day one, and they've got their team in place. I sold a company in Key Largo, Florida, and I hear this all the time. The buyer, no industry experience, said to the seller, how many people finance their equipment? Nobody. Everybody here is rich. They don't need to finance it. And the buyer was already lining up 3 finance companies. And a year later, I said, how many people are financing? He said, 80% of our deals are financed. And he said, people don't say they don't need financing. They tell you, no, you're not going to get the bid. And they're finding somebody who is offering the financing to get the bid, right? They're not going to tell you, I live in a fancy house on the water, but I can't afford a $20,000 air conditioner. They're going to say no, or not call you back. And so this company has grown exponentially because they gave them a choice. They offered financing and didn't cost them anything because they had done their homework and understood what financing was. So there's a lot of
not all the times, but sometimes you can even put like the fact that you do financing in your marketing, if it's allowed. It's not always allowed, I think, but like depending on like the rules of it, sometimes you can even put it in your marketing, and depending on the product, you're getting someone who's coming to you because they just see, oh, I saw that you offer financing. I hadn't seen that anywhere else. I'm going to go with you. So you differentiate yourself that way.
I have people that I've sold companies to, and I've had this financing discussion a lot. So I've learned a lot from it. And they said they don't ever quote anybody a price. They're just like a car dealership. Car dealership doesn't tell you the price. They tell you they tell you the payment. And they do the same thing. They show up to someone's house. Everybody else has been there, said it's going to be $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 for the new equipment. They say, we can put you a new air conditioner in tomorrow for $99. And they win a ton of business by doing that. And so differentiating themselves, educating themselves, I think there's a lot to be done there. And from stealing from other industries. Their number one salesman had worked at a car dealership. He understood financing. understood how important it was, understood how to pitch it. And so he gives them options and gives them choices.
Now, I have another thought that is kind of coming to mind as we're kind of putting a bow on all these different requirements that you should have, things that you need to do to be able to acquire an HVAC business. I'm thinking there's a lot of people kind of flocking to wanting to do this because maybe they saw something about it online. Maybe they heard that the HVAC industry is hot. Maybe they're educating themselves and figuring out, is this the right thing for me? For those who have decided that it is the right thing for them and they have some of these things in place, maybe they're actually in a spot where they can do this. What is the strategy, or what are some of the strategies that they should be approaching this with for the long term? Should they be planning to grow this thing for a few years and then sell it? Should they be planning to hold this long term? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's different for everybody. The trades, in my opinion, generate a ridiculous amount of cash flow with very little assets. So it's an incredible opportunity, right? And let's just put the math to it. If you have a business doing $2 million a year in gross sales, you're probably making $300,000. You could sell it for $1.2 million, pay your 30% taxes on it. You're going to walk away with $700,000. It's not going to generate $300,000 a year for you. So there's not a lot of cash flow investments that you could sell it and invest it into. My belief is always build a business to sell, because if you're building a business to sell, it's going to be worth more. It's going to be easier to run, and it's typically going to run without you, right? If you're building it to sell, you're putting the systems and the things in place that are going to maximize value. That business is typically more profitable, less headache to the seller, less dependent on the seller, has systems and people and processes in place, and typically generates more money. Then, if you don't need to sell it, when somebody comes to buy it, you're able to command a premium. And if they want to write you a ridiculous check, let them own it. If they don't, keep running it and keep making the money yours. So I think building it to sell is the answer, but selling isn't always the answer. I have a lot of young people that call me that they've been able to figure out the business, and they're 30, 35 years old, making $1 million a year. I'm like, I'm going to sell. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do? You're going to get 10 million, potentially. Let's assume max. You're going to get 10 million. You're going to pay 3 million in taxes. Now you've got 7 million. Is your family going to spend less now because you're not generating $1 million a year? No, they're used to living on that $1 million a year. What are you going to do with that 7 million? It's going to produce $1 million. It's not. And so selling isn't always the answer. And it's weird to hear somebody who sells businesses for a living telling people don't sell. But at the end of the day, you have to look at where you are in the curve of life, right? And how much time does it take of your life? If you can build it where it's highly sought after, it probably doesn't take a ton of your time.
It's one of those great paradoxes, right? You build it to sell, you start getting the offers, but then all of a sudden it's this incredible asset that you don't want to let go.
Yeah, and that's the beauty, right? That's the spot to be in. Because then when you're ready to sell, you're going to command a premium, right? That check's going to be bigger and you're going to be done.
I think one of the best things you could possibly have in any business of any sort is optionality. And it sounds like what you're saying is build it with the strategy that's going to give you the most optionality possible, so that, I don't know, you get 10 years down the road and you've got health problems, or you need to relax a little bit, you could sell it. Or you get 10 years down the road and you're in the best shape of your life because you've been running marathons or something, and you're like, I don't want to let go of this thing. I've got 20 more years left in me, and I want to keep going and keep running this, and I can triple it in the next couple of years. You've got the optionality. You can make the right decision for you at that given time.
Yeah, and unfortunately, doing the volume of deals that we've done, I have a lot of people that come to me and say, hey, I've been diagnosed with X, Y, and Z, and I've got 6 months that I've got to do something with this business, and I haven't been profitable, and I haven't been making money, and I don't have systems and staff and people in place. And I've got to tell them, hey, it's got no value. Or the wife that calls me and says, my husband died last week. He was the sole license holder. He did all the bidding. He did all this and that. What do we do? and then there's not a sellable asset, right? Because they didn't plan on that. And so had they been building a business to sell, they could have called me and said, hey, we've got a GM in place. He's got a license. Go to market, sell it or don't sell it. We don't care. We're making $500,000 a year. And that gives you the option, right? And that optionality is where the money's made.
Any final kind of closing notes on what you need to be doing if you're trying to buy an HVAC business in 2026?
So do your homework, right? I mean, I think you guys are doing an incredible job. When we were talking about setting, coming back on the show up, you talked about delivering value, right, for the people who are watching. I think you're doing an incredible job in what you guys are doing. You're not sugarcoating it. You're not saying, it's all unicorns and rainbows and you're going to buy this business with no money out of pocket. It's going to print money. I think do your homework and understanding it. I don't want to come on here saying I don't want to sell somebody a business. Listen, I want to cash everybody's check. I promise you. So I'd love to sell every one of your listeners or viewers a business, but do your homework so that when the time comes and the right deal comes up, that you're in a position to do it. Because otherwise you're just spinning your wheels and wasting your time. And then the right deal is going to come up and you're going to think this checks all the boxes. This is good for me. And, oh, I didn't know I need a license. Oh, I didn't know I need a license holder. Oh, I didn't know I needed 10% down. Oh, I didn't know these things. And then the deal's going to pass them by, and shame on them if that happens.
Patrick, you are one of these one-stop shops for all things HVAC and HVAC selling related. You post videos, you post blogs, you are active online. Where can the people find you?
Well, I spend a lot of money so they can find me in a lot of different places. I do have a YouTube channel that has a lot of videos talking about it. My website, businessmodificationgroup.com. We do 4 articles a month. Typically half are for buyers, half are for sellers. I'm super active on Facebook, LinkedIn. I now have an Instagram, which I'm not as active on, but Facebook and LinkedIn, I'm very active. Reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can. I love helping people who are willing to put in the work, right, to make it happen. And if I can help out, connect with me on any of those platforms, ask away. I'm happy to help. And thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate the work you do. And I'm not saying that to blow smoke for you guys having me here. I think you're doing an incredible job and educating a lot of people. And I think people will be better because of what you're putting out there. And so continue to follow you guys, and it'll help them get closer to buying that dream business.
Thank you, Patrick.
It's been an absolute pleasure having you on again. And you're always dropping dimes and priceless pieces of knowledge. And I think anyone who listened to this is a little bit further ahead in being able to make this dream come true if it's the right thing for them. And I think one thing I just want everyone to kind of like leave themselves with who's gotten this far. What Patrick's told you is he's given you a lot of homework. Anything business related, especially something as big as the prospect of buying a business, you are going to constantly run up against walls and have to just keep running through them. So go into it knowing it's not going to be easy, but it is doable. The information is out there. Patrick just gave you the playbook. It might not happen tomorrow. It might take longer than you expected. You might have to get some more things in place, but Patrick just gave you the playbook. You can make it happen. You just got to put in the work.
Yeah, 100% right. If it was easy, everybody'd be doing it, right? And you wouldn't be able to make the money that you're able to make doing it. So that's the reality of it.
Amen.
Amen. We'll find Patrick anywhere online. Search Patrick Lang. I put it in the little pinned comment here as well. Find him on LinkedIn, especially, I think is where he puts out some of his best content, most informative and really deep dives on everything. So you can start to do some of your homework just based on his content if you do a deep dive there. And Patrick, we'll look forward to having you on the next time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
We appreciate having you on too. Excited to have you on to celebrate 200 businesses. 200.
Absolutely. We'll have to do that. We'll schedule that when it gets close.
200 spectacular.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And we do this show every Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So for anyone who's tuning in, we'll see you on the next one.
See you.